All right, that was the signal I was waiting for. Good afternoon, everyone. Our next guest is Warren Curry. He is a leader who has successfully bridged the worlds of military aviation, government operations, and cutting edge aerospace innovation. Warren's the vice president of sales at Skyryse, a company on a mission to dramatically improve aviation safety through advanced automation. Warren brings more than 25 years of leadership experience, including commanding Marine Corps aviation squadrons, leading global special operations programs, and driving growth and transformation across both government and civilian aviation sectors. He's a combat tested Marine aviator, proven executive, and an entrepreneur who understands what it means to lead teams through complexity, change, and transition. Warren, welcome. Good afternoon.
Yeah. Thank you, Ted. Guys, I'm in LA, so it's still considered morning. Up at 5 o'clock talking to folks on the East Coast and the Pentagon. So I've been up for a while. So if I start drooping, I need people to, shout at me and wake me up. Hey, first of all, and I mean it, honored to be here with you all. You'll see eventually, if you haven't already, you'll miss, some of it I don't miss, but the people I miss tremendously from my military days because it's all about the people, right? So again, great honor to be here. Ted's known me for a long time, so as I go on and on, he may stop me, hey, redirect the conversation, ask a question because I can get off the rails pretty quickly. Um, Hey, so Ted kind of covered it, right? 22 plus years in the Marine Corps, and did a bunch of things like all you have, and then it was time to get out. And so I'll really kind of focus on what that transition was, how I did it, the entities I've been with along the way, and then I'll start going into more kind of perspective and how things I wish I would have known when I went through this transition process. And I'm still learning, right? It's been 8 years private sector. I still feel like I'm new at it every day. So yeah, when I was retiring from the military, from the Marine Corps, I'll be quite honest, I didn't have a great plan. I knew I didn't, me personally, I didn't want to stay in government service, GS type roles. I wanted to get out in private sector, but I had no plan. And to be, honest, I got fortunate. And that's when I'm going to talk recap and what I wish I knew. I got fortunate where I was retiring out of Tampa, and there was an aviation company in Tampa that said, "Hey, would you like to be our site director for our headquarters in East Coast and, kind of help guide and work with mechanics and pilots and customer base?" And I said, sure, great. So but the key there is I took the first leap. I didn't know what that meant. I really didn't know much about the company. But I said, okay, I'm going to jump in and see what happens here. And I'll again go through my civilian career real quick. So I jump on as site director after about 7 to 8 months. The company said, "Hey, we're getting ready to start up a sales team. We're going into production." They were a new company, and they said, "Would you lead and direct the East Coast sales team?" Never in a million years did I think I would be in business development and sales. I never had aspirations, but again, opportunity comes. The old Richard Branson, right? When a good opportunity comes, say yes and figure it out. So I said yes, and from there, I grew an East Coast sales team, did it mildly successfully. They gave me the country eventually. And then over a course of about 3 years, by the time I left that company, and what that company was is they were manufacturing, building, selling, training, supporting with maintenance, a small aircraft called the Icon A5. But through those 3 years or so, by the time I left, I was vice president of sales, marketing, client support, maintenance, flight ops, anything that wasn't building the aircraft, I was help, guiding those teams. And they offered me the CEO position. We can talk why I turned that down, but I elected not to take it. And then I started a new chapter, right? So okay, really enjoyed the chapter, learned a tremendous amount with being at a startup and going through the fire that I went through and learning all the things I learned. So I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I started a company with two gentlemen that I had networked, and you're going to hear, I'm sure you guys are tired of hearing the word network, but over those course of 4 years, I had networked with, and we started a company that still exists today. in the private jet sector. And what Crew Chiefs does, this name of the company, is we provide technical services across the globe during private jet transactions, i.e., selling and buying private jets. So we have 40 people around the world, and we support predominantly the buyer, those buyers going into those transactions. It it was great. I've always wanted to start my own company, and from literally a white piece of paper, there was nothing. A company like ours doesn't exist, so we saw a business model that we thought we could grow, and it's still growing. And so it was a great opportunity. That sector of the industry isn't really exciting to me, and I get really motivated. One of my drivers is passion about what I'm doing, and I knew it wouldn't be sustained, so I gave them 2 years. And after 2 years, I was fortunate enough where Skyryse, the company I work with now, was getting ready to go to market with a minimum viable product. You hear MVP, minimum viable product. They had no sales team, they had no marketing, they had nothing. And they said, I knew the CEO through networking. And he said, would you come to LA and help me start this up? We're ready to start talking about what we're doing and start getting into sales and getting into defense, both international and domestic. And again, I took the leap, right? I packed the U-Haul up. I drove from Tampa to LA and jumped into this organization. So what you can see, and this isn't for everyone, but I took the leap, right? Every time a really good opportunity that I didn't have. And this is very familiar with the worlds we live in the military. I had about 40% of the information I needed to make a decision. But I said, okay, I'm going to go somewhere in the right cardinal heading, and I'll figure out the exact azimuth as I take this course and go along. But it's allowed me to very quickly transition to the private sector and make a difference with the teams I'm a part of, and that's a big driver of me. Um, I'll pause there before I go into maybe perspective and recap and steps and recommendations. But if you guys are interested in any of those companies or roles, let me know. Okay. And by the way, if you have a question while you're doing this, and Ted, you know I'm terrible at looking at this. So if there's a question or you want to stop me, just please raise your hand and we'll go there. This is not rote memorization. Um, so I wrote some notes down, right? First of all, here's perspective of private sector and the values that I hope you hear people tell you you have, but I think you really need to capitalize on interviews. When you get into that job you've always wanted, and when you're even trying to figure out what my next steps are. The first is leadership, and I will tell you in the private sector, core leadership traits that you inherently, every one of you have right now is severely lacking in the private sector. I will tell you, I was just at an executive leadership team offsite yesterday. It was an all-day event, and they were talking about, that we're all senior leaders, and they're like, well, the managers aren't taking ownership. They're not taking accountability. They're not executing, and they're not acting, biased towards action, and they're not taking the ownership. And then at the same time, I'm hearing the folks around me talk about, hey, this isn't a democracy, right? Like, we set the guidelines. So I interjected because you're laughing because all of us know that small unit leadership is where everything gets done, right? You could have the greatest CEO in the world or CEO signing paperwork in an office somewhere. It matters not, right? What matters is that small unit leadership. And for us on this call, we're like, of course, like that's where you give all the resources, guidance, intent, communication, priorities, and give them ownership and let them execute. Because if they do, if you give them all the tools they need and knowledge that they have, ownership and accountability, that they're going to conquer the world, right? But you got to give it to them. And oh, by the way, mistakes are going to be made along the way. Who cares? They're not illegal, they're not immoral. We'll figure it out, right? But anyways, leadership. Leaders eat last. It is not prevalent in the private sector. And this isn't a bad thing, right? I've really enjoyed my private sector experience, but it's just vastly different. Leaders eat first a lot in the private sector. So when you become a private sector employee and you're a leader of any kind and you do that servant leadership that we all get ingrained from day one, right? And I tell the people I work with here that are never in the military, if you're a leader and you don't walk out of the door every day spiritually exhausted, you have not given enough to the people around you, right? And that's what you do. And when you do that, it's going to come back tenfold. Um, Decision making. It shocks me as I transition and still to this day where we get accustomed again to having 49 at best percent of the information we need to make a decision and we just make it and we go, right? It's how we are built in the service in the military, and that is not the norm, right? A lot of wringing of the hands and questions and is this right? And I don't know how many times I've sat in a meeting and the team saying we don't know all the information. I'm like, yeah, we never will, right? So we're going to make it. I know the answer of making no decision. I know what that's going to equate to. That I can definitively tell you what it's going to be. So we're going to make a decision and we're going to go in the right cardinal heading and we'll figure out the exact direction as we go along. You guys inherently have that, so utilize that. Last I'll talk about is resilience and discipline, right? It is not a common trait in the private sector. And I'm not talking discipline where, I still arrive. I'm the first one in the office usually every day. So I guess maybe I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. But, that discipline of, I'm here every day. I'm doing it for my teammates. That isn't natural. And resilience certainly isn't the norm in the private sector. So, those traits they matter, those intangibles matter so much in any place you work. And I just want to confirm or reconfirm or make sure you all have the confidence that you are well equipped to take on really almost outside of brain surgery, probably, unless someone on that calls a brain surgeon, almost anything that you're going to get faced in the private sector because we just have those traits and they go across the spectrum. Um, Here's where I want to focus, if there's no questions. I want to focus on, I call them potential minefields. It's things that I wish I would have known, or it's things I see from transitioning service members as I either interview them, as they come on board, whatever the case may be, that I think like everything in life, right? You try to learn really hard lessons through other people. I haven't done that. My nose bleeds every day. It's the life I live, but if you're smart, you're learning those lessons, right? The one thing, if there's anything in me babbling on that I think I want you all to take away from, and it sounds harsh, and let me go full circle on it, because I've interviewed a lot of transitioning service members. Um, and I say this to friends of mine who are transitioning. And again, it sounds harsh. Don't go to SeaWorld. And when they ask all veterans to stand up and people applaud and think anyone in the private sector owes you anything, right? It sometimes gets delusional to us. And by the way, the people at SeaWorld are genuine. They appreciate all of our service and everything we've done, right, for them. That is genuine. When you get into an interview room, when you get into a company and you're starting this process, they don't owe you anything. And to be quite honest, they don't care about I was overseas and I was leading this many people and this is what we accomplished because it doesn't equate to the business, right? And what they want to get out of you, what they want to understand is, and it's just a hard truth, what is the ROI that you're going to bring to that manager, that CEO, that team? How are you going to make their bottom revenue lines increase over the next 6, 9, 12 months? And it's not a bad thing. It's a paradigm shift. And I'll give you an example. At that first company I worked for, I interviewed a gentleman who was the former Top Gun CO, right? He's the man, right? I mean, he's Maverick in Top Gun, right? He's the guy. And I interviewed him, and all he kept talking about was his success in those roles. But he never, in the entire, it was the first interview, right? In person. So he got through the initial gate. So now he's in front of me for that first interview. And he never gave me as much as I tried to pull it out of him. Like, okay, I got it, right? And I love you, brother. I do. I do. I know you're Tom Cruise. I get it, right? But like, what are you going to do for me? And he was never able to convey that. And he never made it to a second interview. And I actually reached out and said, "Hey, do you want to do a debrief, right? Because I think we all deserve it to each other. You know, hey, that you know." So whenever it's a service member, they don't get it. I say, "Hey, do you want some feedback?" But you know, all the great things he did was not telling me as the VP of sales, marketing, flight operations, you know, at Icon, when I'm looking at my bottom line, I'm trying to figure out how we're paying the light bills next week, right? He's not telling me how he's going to help me. He's just telling me how great he was and all the things he did in the military. So I say that because as you think through your resume and you think through the job you want to have and you think through those first interview processes, right? You really, and you hear this all the time, but I don't see it done really well a lot. How do I convert my speak? How do I convert my experiences to something that's going to resonate? And you do that, you know, what I told the gentleman is you should have gone through, right? You see the job description, sure, but you should go through the company and see what we're doing, you know, see where we're trying to get to, and tie the experience into, hey, you know, I see at Icon, you're trying to, you know, I saw an article, you're trying to increase sales by, you know, 4 times. Here's what I think the value I could bring, and here is, you know, what I can do to start reaching those organizational objectives, right? That would have resonated with me. You're trying to solve my pain points because everyone that interviews you in this cycle, you know, if you're interviewing with me, I'm not, I probably have 14 meetings a day. And through those meetings, I'm getting bombarded by my bosses on, you know, what we're failing at today and what I'm failing on for the month and the quarter and the year, right? So I'm answering those while I'm in meetings. It's really chaotic. And I'm sitting in front of you and I'm trying to focus and I'm trying to give you the the respect and the attention, and I'm trying to be present, but man, you better give me an impact pretty quick because if you're just telling me about your glory days over a beer or a coffee, I'm fascinated. I want to talk to you. I don't. I'm saying I'm sounding harsh, but I don't care while we're in that interview room. I really don't. So if there's one thing I tell people, and I see it from buddies and friends of mine, you know, you have to reinvent yourself, and don't be afraid of that. You and I used this last time and someone commented on my LinkedIn page, just like I tell, and this is not being pejorative, like I tell my kids as they're going into college and beyond college, and I tell transition service members, the windshield is literally 90 times bigger than the rear view mirror for a reason. Like you got to look forward and you can't keep looking back, right? The future and everything you want is in front of you. But if you're constantly staring at the rear view mirror about all the things that you're going to miss and all the people, and that's valid, right? So the rear view mirror is there for a reason. And I look back all the time, right? But majority of my day is spent in that windshield and looking forward and think of that when you're reinventing yourself and how you're articulating that reinvention to your future employers. And I will get to a more pleasant, right? But I'm just it's not a you know it's just a recognition. Realize as you transition, and I will do this. I'm being honest when I have transitioning service members. When you are at a point where now you're at the job offer phase, and you know your goals, and I'll just use very rough numbers. Your goals are I want to make $10 a year and you think your value is at $10 a year, and it probably is at $10 a year. In fact, it's probably at $12 a year. You're probably going to get offered less. And I'm saying that not to scare you, right? There's an insurance policy that private sector people will put sometimes on transitioning service members. And the reason is because 90% of transitioning service members, 85%, I see transition incredibly well. And they absolutely get in the private sector, and you have friends that have done it and they're crushing it. But there is that 15% that have a harder time transitioning. And when my bottom line is very tight, I almost put out an insurance policy. Now, with that being said, as soon as that person shows me the proper transition, that person's not going to get 10 or $12, they're probably getting 15, 20, right? So your growth path is very quick, but you got to recognize that there is a risk of transition that companies will sometimes will apply. So my point with all this, if you have a really good opportunity and you know you can crush it, and it's something you really want to drive for, take a bet on yourself. I did the first job. I'm not being braggadocious. I'm probably making four times than I was in my first job, and this is over the course of whatever it is, 8 years, right? But you got to take a bet on yourself, and you got to show companies just get me in the door. You get me in the door, get me in the game, coach. Get me in the door, and I'm going to show you what I'm going to do. The good news with the private sector is once you prove that value, it happens very quick. It's not knocking the military, but it's not like, well, I got to wait for 3 years until I make that next, year bracket to get more money. That no longer exists. And you'll see in the private sector, people will come in at a junior level, and within 2, 3 years, they're at a senior level, and they're getting paid for accordingly. So, I'm looking at my notes. Take a risk. Okay, let's get to another. And I heard the gentleman before to my interview process. You hear this, and I've already said it once. Network, network, network. It's very uncomfortable. It is so it's uncomfortable for me and I was talking to mentors in the private sector, and they're like, "You got to network," and I'm like, "But I don't want to network, right? I mean, I just kind of want to apply on LinkedIn and." Maybe someone will take a bet, right? I was wrong, right? You absolutely have to network. Here's one good thing, and it's not in our DNA in the military to do this, right? We come in every day and we do everything we can to the teammates to the left and right of us, and that's how we're groomed. And now I got to reach out and tell someone, hey, I need your help, or can you introduce me to this person? And it just feels very uncomfortable. It is so commonplace in private sector. It happens to me almost not every day, easily 3, 4 times a week. I'm getting folks reach out to me and say, "Hey, can you do this for me?" And of course, the answer is yes, 99% of the time, right? But the answer is yes because it's just how it's done here in the private sector. And when we have job openings here, don't quote me on this. We had a job opening, maybe like 3 or 4 jobs, and I was asking the talent acquisition team, hundreds, I think it was like 600 applications, right? So that's what you're up against. Don't be afraid of that, right? Don't be, it's not to be fearsome, right? I don't want to put you in a position to think not any of you are going to succeed because you are. But just recognize what's in front of you, right? Maybe use military terms, a threat in front of you. So, okay, if there's 600 applications going into probably an AI database that's trying to get keywords, that's eventually going to get to the first level recruiter that's going to look at it, and it stages along the way. What a way to get, because when someone's networking and they reach out to me, and I'll give you a clear example here in a second, and they say, "Hey, I saw that job opening. Updated my resume. Take a look. Do you think I'm a fit?" And if I think it's a fit, I'm literally, and this happens, you hear about it, I'm printing it off. I'm going over to the head of talent acquisition. I put the resume on the desk, and I'm like, reach a hold of this person. I want this person to be interviewed. It literally happens every day. So I know you hear these stories. I'm telling you, I've done it. It's true. To give you an example, there's a gentleman that's been here for about 5 months that I work with. Job opening came up inside of my team. We served together 2001 to 2004, maybe I forget, three. I knew him. He didn't, and his resume just sparkled, right? And he's now on board. And I literally walked over to head of talent acquisition. I'm like, and again, still a process you have to go through, right? There's a lot of people that interview you, but it absolutely gets you in the door. It will get you that phone call, and it probably gives you opportunity. What you do from that opportunity is on you, right? But he's working here now, and that in fact, actually two people that have been hired in the last 4 months. Now that I think about it, and one was Marine, one was Army, and I knew the Army individual. Both work here now, and it was based on me going over saying, put this person on the interview docket now. So use it. Point is network, network, network. It's absolutely a must. Um, if you're going into this process and you really care about the job you applied for, the networking event that you went to, and you got your resume in there, prospect the company, prospect the people, right? You should never go into, and I'm sure you hear this, an interview process without knowing. I mean, you should be able to literally tell the person in front of you, because you've already prospected, where they went to college, what their career path was. Look at what they're posting, right? I mean, know these people. And again, you don't want to sound like a creeper, right? You don't want to start the interview process like that, but you need to understand their perspective and where they're coming from and what their background is. If you have a common tie, great. But that will enable you in those conversations. The company itself, if I'm interviewing someone and I recognize they have done zero work in this interview, and again, I'm sounding harsh, but it's not. But it's just I'm just trying to emphasize, if I believe this person's done no homework and I have 14 other meetings today, how much time do you think I'm giving this person? Right? I'm like, if it wasn't important to you, why should it be important to me? So make sure you prospect and make sure you dig in and you're as prepared as possible for that interview. Um, when you reach out to people via the network, when you reach out to, maybe it's a smaller company, it's direct to the recruiter or the hiring manager, don't reach out once and say, well, I reached out. I didn't get an answer. I reached out. I will, and I'm being honest with you, right now, I have over 6,500 unread emails. I probably get 300 emails a day. I do not answer every email, and it's not because I don't want to, right? I'm telling you, the pace of private sector, listen, it's great out here. It really is. I miss every second of the Marine Corps, I really do, but it's great in the private sector. But it's just different, and the pace at which some of these companies move at is so hectic and frantic that I just don't have time. Even though I spend the weekends and nights trying to dig through my emails. So my point with that though is, when you reach out to someone, it may be someone you know. And there's not a response, don't take it as they're not interested, right? You really have to beat that drum. And I'll give you an example. Now, person wasn't in the service, but they're a young individual, somewhat out of college, that is now on the team. And he probably eventually sent me like 3 emails until I got to one. And the email was incredibly well written. I didn't know this individual. I could tell he prospected. I saw his energy and desire and his attitude. And of course, I responded and I CC'd the head of talent acquisition, and I said, let's call him John. I said, I CC'd, hey John, thanks again for the email. Really well written. Head of talent acquisition, please schedule a call and let's get him on. And now he's working, right? And I asked him about it later, and he goes, man, I felt like I didn't know if I had the right email. You weren't answering. I'm like, I just didn't see the other two. Or if I did, I didn't have time to read them, right? So my point with that is, don't um, you know, and I did when transitioning. So a lot of these are minefields I did, right? When I was kind of like, well, maybe this company, right? And I reached out and I sent an email and no one responded. And I'm like, well, I guess they don't care. That's not it. Don't take it that way. So really got to drive it hard. One last thing before networking, before I finish it off. If someone gives you that intro, if I reach out to Ted and I say, "Hey Ted, can you give me an intro to this person? I'm interested in something they're doing, right?" And he gives you the intro, please have the professional courtesy to follow through on that intro. It's the one thing I tell people. Networks are the most precious thing you got in the private sector, and you need to make sure when a network connection is doing something for you, you at least reciprocate with effort. Again, may not be the eventual opportunity you're looking for, may not be the right fit. That's fine. I don't care about that. But if I'm reaching out to my network for you, please make sure that you professionally follow up, because that's embarrassing for me through my network. Correct, right? Um, you probably hear this a lot. My perspective, just Warren Curry's, do not rely on LinkedIn for resumes. I told you before, 600 resumes for a few openings. And I'm guilty of that. Well, I'll put a LinkedIn out, right? There's hit rates. There is hit rates. It does happen. I'm just telling you, what I would do, knowing what I know now, I would put it through LinkedIn if that's what they want. I would prospect a company. I would find connections in that company. I would connect with people on LinkedIn. I would try to find an email, and I would do more because the odds of if you do connect and a nice message, hey, I just applied. I'm super interested. I'd love to jump on a call with you if able to discuss the opportunity, you're not going to probably get a response. Follow up again. Hey, I know you're super busy, just really would like to connect, or is there someone you can connect me to, right? But the resume will go from it's one of 600 to, you know what, you just got on top of the stack.
Hey, Warren, Clay's got a question.
Clay, shoot.
Nope.
I'm number one.
My volume
If you think
my
I'm number
volume
one, Clay,
slider
I'm
got
going to
in the
tell
way of
you, I
my
think you're
microphone
spot
button. I
on.
apologize. So I do want to talk about that real quick. So hypothetical. A lot of people do have LinkedIn, but when you're looking at sending a message to somebody, there are people that do have alignment with your role and your scope that are not that active on the platform. Like, for example, I'm, looking at an organization that somebody who would be a peer to me hasn't posted something in like a year. So what sort of strategies, if you don't see a lot of LinkedIn, activity, like what would you do in that situation? Still keep that persistence up, or what's your thoughts on that?
No, yeah, you don't have, yeah, you efficiency, right? I will tell you, I wouldn't go to peers first, is I would try to find the hiring manager. I would try to find the lead. Again, I've been doing this in the private sector for 8 years, so this isn't like I have to go direct to a CEO, like, and I'm gonna write that CEO. And don't be bashful about doing it. So if you're just transitioning out and let's say there's a director position. And by the way, I'm still figuring out the private sector hierarchy. Sometimes the terms make no sense to me, right? But anyways, um, if if you're looking for a director position, I'm targeting VPs because those are the decision makers. Those are the people. And also, by the way, if they're not the hiring manager, they know the hiring manager real well, and those are the people that can go over to the recruiting team, and talent acquisition is kind of a new name for it, but and literally put the resume with the senior recruiter and say, this person here now you won't, yeah, obviously I don't talk like that to people, but hey, I'm really interested in this individual. They reached out. I think there might be a fit. Can you contact Clay, have a conversation with them? But if it goes well, I really like to jump on a 30-minute call. That's how I
So
do it, and it
okay,
happens.
so hiring manager, if you can't identify the hiring man, I mean, I'm going to sit there and try to hit up the CEO personally myself
Yeah.
of this company. So, no, I appreciate that. Thank you, because that's where a lot of people have that apprehension. It's like they haven't posted anything in 5 months or a year or what have you. And it's fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah, and by the way, his name's Reed. You could probably see it on our website, right? He works for me. He's recently out of college. So I say young because I'm old as dirt at this point. But I mean, he he did a textbook way of how to engage. And I asked him when he came on board, or maybe during the interview process, I said, how'd you do that? Like, I'm just curious, right? Because obviously he's sales, right? And sales is very similar to finding a job, by the way. So I said, tell me your process. Tell me how you did this. And he said, I knew that I wanted to be in an aviation tech, a tech aerospace, younger company, right? I didn't want to go to a bigger company. I wanted a young company where I can make a difference right away and grow quickly and learn a lot of things. And he said, so I literally researched dozens of companies. And over the course of a week, I narrowed it down to the companies that really interested me. And whatever the number was, 10. And he said, I just started attacking it. And he goes, I found out from the website who was the vice president of sales and business development, who was corporate affairs, and I just started writing emails. And he said, and he laughed, like initially the response rate really wasn't that great. I was kind of, um, not bothered. What's the word I'm looking for? He was disappointed in the return rate. He's like, but so I just kept hitting it, and I kept, hey, and he goes, over time, after like two, three, four emails, I started getting responses. But he said I made sure that I spent time on every email I wrote, keep it short enough, right? Okay, here's another thing. I told you 6,500 unread emails. If I see more than a paragraph, I am not reading that whole thing. And I know that sounds really bad, but I'm not, right? So three, four sentences, bam, like hit it, right? And show that you prospect and show that energy. And this is why I think I can deliver. Again, put me in, coach. It was literally textbook. And by the way, he joined our team, whatever it was, 4 or 5, 6 months ago, 3 months ago, and he's crushing it. Yeah, yeah, I would, and I'll say this. He at, let's say 25, I don't know how old he is. He at 25 was more courageous than I was at 40 when I started looking for jobs because I wouldn't have reached out to the vice president. I'd have been intimidated, quite honestly. It's private sector. I don't know. These VPs, they seem like they got it all figured out, right? But trust me, we don't. I'm barely getting to work on time. But he had the courage. I'm trying to be PC. He had the courage to just reach right out and go for it. And I will tell you that energy, that enthusiasm, that courage resonates with CEOs, VPs, you name it. So don't be timid. Don't be Warren. Don't be timid. Like believe in yourself and take the swing. Because the answer of not taking the swing we know is no, right? So take the swing and see what happens. Um,
Warren.
oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Hey,
Can you talk
go
to us
ahead.
about Skyryse? Can you tell us
Okay,
about
yep.
the
See, Ted,
company
yeah,
a
you put
little
me back
bit?
on track. Okay, so I'll kind of tell you what we're doing here at Skyrise and why it excited me. So for those in aviation, right? Skyrise is a hardware software solution for any aircraft, and it's focused on flight control logic with a full authority fly-by-wire backbone. What does that mean, Warren? This company over the last 10 years has designed all the hardwares, and I won't go into the specs, but from the actuators to the flight control computers to the motor control boxes that tell things what to do to the cockpit interface. Really, what we have done for both civilian, commercial, defense, and even Cal Fire, that's a client of ours, is we've taken really complicated cockpits and really complicated interfaces that air crew like Ted and I had to deal with that overwhelm you, task saturate you, and exceed any human's cognitive loading, and we simplify it to a very manageable level. And by doing that, you now allow the air crew to actually focus on what they're out there to do, the mission at hand, as well as do it safely. And I can go into some of those safety factors, but you guys probably don't care unless you ask questions too much of the product. So we are aircraft agnostic and that's the way the system was designed. So we started off in some civilian helicopters and we've been flying those. To give you an example, we got a Black Hawk this last year, 2025, and from first wrench turn to it flying with our complete operating system was 91 days, which is light speed in aviation. So we are a company that's focused on, let me say it this way too. Let's use a little analogy. I use this all the time. Think of what, and again, hate this company, love this company, I don't care. Think of what Tesla has done in the automobile industry, right? And I, I talk to some people about it, and they'll be like, "I hate Tesla." I'm like, "Okay, so you drive a Dodge Ram. That's fine, cool." I said, "Your Dodge Ram looks different today inside that cabin than it did 10 years ago because companies like Tesla and others force that interface, force that vehicle to change the way that the driver interacts with it. And Skyrise, in a lot of ways, we can tell I get passionate about this, is doing that for aviation because the things that Ted and I flew and the interfaces were literally like 1940s technology sometimes, and we couldn't manage them successfully to execute the mission. And then that's all we're out there to do, and it's really frustrating. So for our defense partners, Cal Fire, you name it, they love it. For the private sector owner who's buying a helicopter, what it really does is keep them incredibly safe. It's easy for them to use, sure, but there is safety features inherent in our system that they really have to work on doing something dangerous to injure themselves or the aircraft, and it just keeps them in that safety bubble because really all they're concerned about is getting from the airport to their vacation home on a Friday afternoon. Um, Let's talk about the company. So that's what we're building. The company is about 80. I'm looking over. I can see it's all windows. It's about 85% engineers. The rest of the 15% makes up of flight ops, flight testing, maintenance, and then some folks like myself that run around and talk too much on the sales and BD side. Ted and I have been talking. To me, this organization. And again, if you're interested, please hit me up or have Ted introduce, you to me. The pace at which we move in operational units in the military and a little bit of the chaos that we thrive in, that defines Skyryse in that we are moving very fast. We are a very innovative company. 91 days to modify an aircraft from old traditional controls to a new, updated, best of technology operating system is unheard of, right? But we always say we strive for the impossible and we work really hard to get that. And last thing I'll say about this company is everyone I work with, which is rare, I respect and value. Like we have some incredibly talented people on this team. Am I BFFs with all of them? No, don't have to be. When I walk into a room with them, I know that they know what they're doing, that they care, that they're passionate, and we can accomplish that, anything with that right attitude.
So Warren, you said you're 85% engineers, but what kind of roles at Skyrise would be good fits for veterans in your opinion?
Yeah, I think a couple. Let me start with the easiest one, right? For anyone that's involved in aviation inside of maintenance, whether that be actually working on the aircraft or maintenance admin or flight operations of any kind, now with the Blackhawks to include crew chiefs, that is the tip of the spear of the organization. I get to go up there next week. They're about 60 miles away because we're in LA and the airspace is too complicated to do test flights in. So we do it about 60 miles away. I don't get enough time up there because all of the PhD level we have 1.3 million lines of code in our system. All that PhD engineering, master's degree, right? It all is very impressive. It comes down to putting that in an aircraft and putting people out there to test it and fly it. So I call that the tip of the spear, right? And to me, that's the most exciting place to be in our entire organization because that is where, they're taking all the complexity of what we've simplified and they're finding ways to use it. And so if you see any of the videos we put out, it's always in the flight stuff, right? That's where they're doing. Now, separate from that, IT, obviously when you have immense amount of technical code, engineering computers. Our IT department is growing. So if you're in IT, and again, you know, our team works, not everyone, right? We try to manage it. Weekends, nights, there's always someone working here, right? And so, our IT team has to grow and be very flexible with that support because if we have a flight test on Monday and the team's working it on Sunday and something's not working, we just can't miss a flight Monday, right? So it's real time. And again, but I think, and I've never been an IT person, especially in the military, right? But that like, hey, it's mission based. I have to support, everyone there to drive the mission to get the thing done on the day we need to get it done. And there is no, we can just wait a day, right? That doesn't exist. Um, and lastly, if anyone's in supply chain logistics, first of all, if you are, kudos to you because what I realized in private sector, there's an adage in the military, amateurs talk tactics and professionals talk logistics. And in the private sector, that is tenfold because you can have all the greatest idea in the world, but if you can't support the supply chain and all the parts and everything, it doesn't matter. So, anyways, long story short, flight operations, IT, supply chain.
Awesome. Thanks, Warren. Hey, we're about to run out of time here, but does anybody have any questions for Warren before we let him go? If you got a question, raise your hand.
Go ahead, Tim.
Hey, Warren, thank you again for speaking. It took a little bit of time to kind of research, at least while you were talking there on the company. I'm a Seahawk driver, so not a Blackhawk, but I'm here
Shipmate.
for the Navy. So
Yeah.
I totally can relate to a lot of the cool things. And I think one of the biggest things is like emergency management. I saw that as one of the capabilities, and like that's something that we as aviators have not struggled through, but we have boldface and we have memory items. So how does that technology like help? I don't want to say eliminate the pilot in the seat, but like how is that mitigation kind of autonomous and becoming autonomous in a way?
Yeah, so one of the neatest videos we have is that automated auto rotation, which is pretty remarkable, right? I will tell you that's not the most important thing we do with emergencies. The most important thing we do is support automation and autonomy to reduce pilot-induced compound emergencies. And anyone not in aviation, I'm sorry, I'm going to geek out here with Tim a little bit, but you and I know, right? You lose a single engine, it's usually the reactions of the air crew in that aircraft that either can get you home safely or very quickly turn into a really bad situation. And
Certainly.
so our system in front of you, by the way, there's no circuit breakers anymore. It's all digital. Everything's digital. So you have that single engine emergency. It's going to walk you through the steps. It's going to provide recommendations. It's going to ask you, do you want to do X, Y, and Z to include reducing your available flight envelope to not exceed single engine parameters, right?
Hmm.
Because it just takes one little mistake there. So to me, when defense, yeah, automated auto rotation is great. You lose all the engines. It's the reduction of pilot compound induced emergencies through automation and autonomy that's the most valuable.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think shortening that time to your last item is a big step. So that's awesome. And again, thank you for everything that you do. I'm very excited to connect with you, and that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, please connect. I'd love to geek out with you. So go ahead, Trenton. By the way, Trenton Cyber, I'm jealous because that's one thing I miss when I saw cyber. Anytime we're talking to defense and you're in the private sector, our cyber is not nearly good enough for any defense agency I'm talking to ever.
I did have a question. Are all your positions based in California only, or?
Yeah, I'll throw out 90% on site. 90% on site where we don't do remote a lot. And you'll see this a little bit with startups. There are certain positions. We have an IT individual that's remote that I work with all the time, right? The idea behind that is we are solving challenges on a daily basis, and to have people
Yeah.
on site is definitely beneficial. But that's not true of every position. I have
Okay.
business development people in Florida, Alabama, DC, so certain
Yeah.
positions make sense.
Okay.
But yeah, cyber, by the way, management, that's why I say I'm envious of you because that is a growing need in the private sector and here at Skyryse.
Well, awesome. Yeah, Warren, we really appreciate your words of wisdom today and all the information about your company. And if nobody else has any questions, we'll go ahead and wrap up here.
Hey, by the way, Ted, you were
Incredible.
never this nice to me when we served in the Marine Corps. You're just being very generous.
I had to try really hard not to mention the Cleveland Browns today, but you brought me to
Hey, thank you all. I
it.
appreciate it. Hey, feel free to reach out and connect. Anything I can do for any one of you would be a privilege.
Yeah. Hey, Warren. By the way, if he's polite to you, he wraps me up every once in a while. So he's trading it off on me.
He wore me out every day we served together. So yeah.
That's not a surprise. I'm just kidding.
And hey,
Thank you
everybody,
all.
Warren's LinkedIn information is in the chat. So if you want to connect with him, you'll find it there.
Elena, go Browns. Hell yeah. All right.